Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into probably the most complex thing in the entire universe, your brain. And we're going to do it by following just one single message on its incredible journey down one single neuron.
All right, so first things first, let's just tackle one of the biggest myths out there. You've heard this a million times, right? That we only use 10% of our brains? Well, that's completely false. But the real story that it kind of hints at is actually way, way more interesting.
You see, for decades, science was pretty much obsessed with neurons. They were the stars of the show because they're the ones sending all the electrical signals, and honestly, they were just easier to see and measure. But it turns out they are far from the only ones talking inside your head.
And this is where that whole 10% myth gets its tiny grain of truth. While we use all of our neurons, they only make up about 10% of the cells in our brain. Yeah, for every one of your 90 billion neurons, you have about 10 of these glial cells. That's a mind-blowing 900 billion of them. We used to think they were just, brain glue, but now we know they send their own chemical signals, playing this huge vital role in everything the brain does.
But to really understand how a single thought even gets off the ground, we have to start with the main messengers. So let's zoom in and follow the journey of one signal down one of those 90 billion neurons. Our journey starts right here, at the dendrites. Look at them. They look like these intricate, tiny branches. They're basically the neuron's inbox. A single neuron can have thousands of these things, which means it's constantly listening to messages from a massive network of other cells all at the same time. From all those dendrites, the signals come flooding into the soma, which is the cell body. You can think of this as the neuron's command center. It takes in all that information and it has to make a really important decision. Is this message a big enough deal to pass along?
If the answer is yes, if the signal is a go, then that message is sent screaming down the axon. And this thing is a biological superhighway. Some axons are tiny, but some are unbelievably long. Did you know you have one that runs from your lower back all the way to your big toe? And the messages on this highway, they can travel at over 300 miles per hour. Just incredible.
So how in the world do they move that fast? Well, many axons are wrapped in this fatty layer called the myelin sheath. It works like insulation on a wire, letting the electrical signal literally jump down the axon, which massively boosts its speed. This insulation is absolutely critical. When it breaks down, it can lead to devastating diseases like multiple sclerosis. So the path is pretty clear, right? The message gets received by the dendrites, it gets processed in the soma, then it gets fired down the axon, and finally it arrives at the terminal buttons where it's all ready to be passed on to the next cell in line.
Now, we've been talking about this message and this signal, but what is it actually? What is this thing that's traveling so incredibly fast? Well, it's all about electricity.
It's a very brief but very powerful electrical charge that scientists call an action potential. This is it. This is the fundamental spark of communication in your entire nervous system. Every thought you have, every feeling you feel, every move you make, it all starts with these tiny little electrical pulses.
So how does it work? Well, a neuron is kind of like a tiny charged battery. When it's just sitting there waiting, it's in a polarized resting state with a negative charge on the inside. But when it gets enough signals coming in, it hits a tipping point and it depolarizes. The charge inside flips to positive and zap! It fires that action potential right down the axon.
And what's really fascinating is that this whole process follows what's called the all or none law. There's no such thing as a weak firing or a strong firing. A neuron either hits that threshold and fires with its full, consistent power, or it doesn't fire at all. It's a digital system. It's either on or it's off, every single time. Okay, so our electrical spark has raced all the way to the end of the axon. But now we have a problem, a big one, actually. Neurons don't physically touch each other. There's this tiny little gap in between. So how does the message get across?
It has to cross this microscopic space called the synapse. And to do that, the neuron pulls off an incredible magic trick. It instantly converts that electrical signal into a chemical one just for that short little journey across the gap.
And those chemical messengers, we call them neurotransmitters. When the action potential gets to the end of the line, it makes these little sacs burst open, releasing these chemicals into the synapse. Each neurotransmitter has a totally unique shape, kind of like a key, and it's designed to fit perfectly into a specific lock or receptor site on the next neuron.
And I know you've heard of some of these guys. Dopamine, for instance, is the one we always hear about with pleasure, reward, and that feeling of motivation. And then there's serotonin, which is a huge player in managing our mood, our sleep, and even our hunger. The balance of these chemicals is everything to how we feel and function day to day.
So, now that we understand this incredibly elegant and delicate electrical and chemical system, we can start to see how things from the outside world, from your morning coffee to powerful medications, can actually hack it and change the way our brain communicates.
Most of these drugs work in one of two main ways. First, you have agonists. You can think of these as master keys. They either mimic a natural neurotransmitter or they boost its effects, basically turning up the volume on the signal. Then, on the flip side, you have antagonists. These are like putting gum in the lock. They fit into the receptor, but they don't turn it on, so they block the natural chemical from doing its job.
And you can see this playing out with stuff you encounter every day. Nicotine, for example, is an agonist. It mimics a chemical that helps your muscles move. Antidepressants, like Prozac, are agonists that work by keeping more serotonin active in the synapse. And on the antagonist side, the caffeine in your coffee works by blocking the signals that make you feel sleepy. And Botox? It paralyzes muscles by blocking those very same muscle-moving signals. So let's just pull this all together. The crucial takeaway here is that every single thought is this amazing two-part journey. It starts as an electrical spark, an action potential that speeds down the neuron, then it becomes a chemical leap across the synapse, using neurotransmitters. This delicate, high-speed dance is, quite literally, how we experience the world. And that leaves us with a final, really profound question to chew on. If everything we are, our memories, our personality, our feelings, our love, is ultimately just a unique pattern of these tiny cells firing in a specific sequence, what does that really mean for who and what we are?